Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And don't we always discuss very important issues on this channel? Now, the title for today's afternoon's program and discussion is U.S. War on Venezuela, Oil, Greed, or Empire Control? That is a question that we'd like to ask. There are many people in the world, including in the Caribbean region and Latin American region, also who think that the United States is just about getting Venezuelan oil. But is that a simplistic explanation of what the United States empire is about? No, I mean, to an extent, yes, it is. Just to get the oil. It's not just to get the oil, it's to control the economic, the military, the political resources, or the human resources, human capital, everything that the country has. The United States desires to control. The United States is the only superpower in the world. People are talking about the multipolar world. Now, I can say that the multipolar world has always existed, particularly in the Western world. We've lived in multipolar world for the most part, right? When we think of history, even the beginning of Western history, when I say beginning, I mean the beginning of their coming to what they call the New World here in the Americas, even though it's not the New World, but it's the New World for the world at large for them, since they did not know this territory and this part of the hemisphere existed. So yeah, so from that perspective, it is the New World, right? New for Europeans and maybe some other peoples. The fact of the matter, during that time, we had the Spaniards, we had the French, we had the Germans and the British, and all of these Western European nations who were trying to get as much resources from the region, from the hemisphere, from the Americas. During that time, we know that the French and the Spanish and the British and all of these people were roaming in search of newfound wealth, the gold, silver, the diamonds, and all the natural resources that existed in this part of the globe. Now, that was a multipolar world too, if you will, right? Because the French and the Spanish and the British and all of these people, they were on the scene at the same time. And of course, we know that is why we are in a region in which we speak multiple languages, right? We speak Spanish, we speak English, we speak Dutch, right? We speak, French, okay? And the derivatives of those languages. Very important that we understand that. So don't you think that that was also a multipolar world? Now, what do you mean by multipolar world? Some people are suggesting that China and Russia are more cooperative, and that is what we mean by a multipolar world, that they're not about controlling the resources of countries as Western European countries have done. If you read the pages of history, I have never heard of any empire that wanted to share the wealth. I have never heard of any global power that wanted to work cooperatively with any of its subjects or any of the people or countries that it dominated. That has never happened, and I don't think it will. When we look at China, for example, that is in the Caribbean, how many hospitals and schools, has China built? They're there and yeah, and they're sacking the wealth. I'm not suggesting that they might not be giving a few gifts here and two, but for those gifts that they give to the people or to these countries, they're getting far more than what they are giving. Very important that you understand that. Some of the ports and the prime lands that they're receiving and that they're actually arresting and claiming, it means, therefore, that they're leaving these countries dependent upon them. So whether it's the United States or it is China or it is Russia, they're not there to give you gifts for nothing. Okay? They're also there to dominate because that is what is in the average human being. That is what our nature is. We like to dominate when we can, when we think that we are stronger. And we sometimes have to control ourselves, even husbands sometimes, and in relationships, and probably wives have to control themselves if they find themselves where they think that they're financially superior or physically superior or in other facets, right? They have to control themselves if they want the marriage to work. Okay? So human beings have the tendency, if not controlled by God, to dominate, and to dominate sometimes in the most brutal ways. When you read the pages of history, you have to drink a cup of tea, don't you? Because you have to sort of, um, you know, take a break away from the levels of evil and crudity. And I'm talking about human crudity that you read about. Okay? So don't think that China and Russia are going to be countries that want to cooperate and live in this wonderful world where we are sharing equally the resources that exist. It's not going to happen. And if you look at Africa also, many African countries speak about the Chinese and how they have come there and they have exploited their resources, and that they're not there to develop Africans, but they're there to capture as much resources as they can. Okay? You know, Jamaica, for example, has been hosting the Chinese for years. And I don't know of any school they have yet built, a university, a state-of-the-art university that they have built. And they've been there for donkeys of years. And Jamaica has had a special relationship with China for many years. Okay? So we have to be very careful when we talk about a multipolar world, because that is never going to happen. People are vying for the supremacy. The world powers, whether China, the United States, okay, Russia, they're all vying for global supremacy. Now, one might be more aggressive. The United States, I can agree, it might be more aggressive because she has a military superior to all of them combined, to all of the global powers that I have spoken about combined. Why? Because she invests much more in her military than all the industrialized nations combined. Very important that we understand that. So when she is in that superior position, then she is going to use all her might and all her power to conquer. And that is what she is doing. Okay, that is what she's doing. And it's very important as citizens that we become more aware of what we mean by the US empire. Now, the US empire is an empire that will have to be studied for a long, long time. Okay, because we know that it did not just come about as an empire, it came about as a republic. But there are scholars who talk about the fact that there was, in fact, what you call the Continental Empire, because no sooner had the United States become a republic in 1776 than it started to expand on slavery, one, and it started to, after slavery, it started to capture other lands, right? Like Mexico, Guam, Hawaii. So we can talk about the Continental Empire. That is how America started out, even though she said that she was about freedom and democracy and, and a country that honors and respects the rule of law. But evidently she didn't. But what has fooled many people is her constitution. Her constitution is a noble, filled with very noble and high ideals. And because of that, and also the prosperity that she has generated over the years, due to the exploitation of many peoples, including Black people and foreign peoples around the world, capturing their resources, she has prospered. Okay, so people think that the model of the United States is exemplary. But when you look beneath the surface, you see how ugly the beast is. Looks like a lamb, looks very noble, looks very beautiful. That is on the surface, but beneath the surface lies a snake. and that venomous snake. And we've got to understand that. Another argument I'm seeing coming out of, based on the responses I'm getting on my video, is that America is here to help the Caribbean. The Trinidadians and the Guyanese are suggesting, some of them, not all of them. I must make it very clear here that there are many Trinidadians and Guyanese who are level-headed and they understand the implications of a war in the region. Okay? But there's those who think that the United States, the bigger brother, is a bigger fish, and they are going to come and they're going to beat Venezuela. And I think the United States can beat Venezuela easily. I am not going to argue that. I think that that is undeniable. It is something that cannot be refuted. Whatever Venezuela has, I'm not saying that they don't have a military, and they will put up a fight, and they will fight to the end. However, they can't win the United States. Right? We have to understand that they won't be able to win in terms of, when I say win now, I mean that eventually the United States will get what she wants, despite the collateral damage on both sides. There will be collateral damage on both sides, and it will be a lot of collateral damage in Trinidad and in Guyana and maybe surrounding countries, neighboring countries. But the United States doesn't care. What the United States wants as a bully is what she wants. And she will get what she wants despite the consequences that may ensue. Very important that we understand these, these points. So don't believe you're watching an action movie where you boom, boom, down, and somebody hits the person and the person falls and emerges the winner. This is not MacGyver. This is real life, and it comes with real life experiences and consequences. And if you don't want to understand from what perspective I'm speaking, just look at what happened in Iraq. Okay? The United States went into Iraq on the pretext that it was there because Saddam Hussein was actually hosting or had weapons of mass destruction, even though the United Nations had argued otherwise. And also the CIA, the United States' own secret intelligence gathering organization, had told them that there was no known weapons of mass destructions. That's what Saddam Hussein was actually keeping. Okay? But the United States said, nonetheless, we're going. And look at the consequences of that war and what is happening in the Middle East and the chaos that it has left in that country of Iraq. And the United States is not there to build it back. Afghanistan is the same thing. She's not there to build back the nation. So if Trinidad and Guyana think that this is a joke and that if the United States should go and drop a bomb, that it might not be bombing some of your cities, we hope not. But you have to understand that this is no joke. And what they're going to say when you have the loss of thousands of lives is, wow, it is collateral damage. And you have to pick up the pieces and move on. And many times you will not be getting any assistance. And your lives will be even more miserable. Think about it. This Essequibo region that you're talking about has always been there. They've always, I'm sure, had the Venezuelans and the Guyanese have had their combats. Why has the combat now been intensified the moment we're now seeing where the United States, during Trump's first administration, has been heightening the rhetoric about deposing the regime of Nicolas Maduro? Why is Trinidad's Prime Minister, Kamala Person de Caesar, now talking as violently as she did the other day when the U.S. warships attacked, or planes attacked the boat that was carrying alleged narco-terrorists? Why? And said that they deserved to have died violently, and was commending the U.S. military for the action that they had carried out in the Southern Caribbean waters. Why did she talk like that? Is that typical of how Caribbean prime ministers and presidents speak? I don't think so. I don't think so. And yes, we want to get rid of criminals in our society, but we're living in a world that we can't just describe as black and white. things are not going to happen overnight without us also realizing, coming to grips with the truths, with the causes, the root causes of some of the very terrible events that are happening in our society, including criminality, including gang warfares. I would like Jamaica, for example, to get rid of the gangs, to dismantle the gangs there, the garrison constituencies, which, have paralyzed that economy, paralyzed that country from moving forward for many years, for many years. Okay? Yet still, I know that it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight until we can look at, examine the serious social problems that exist in that society. Trinidad has to do that likewise. Is the wealth in Trinidad and Tobago, just like Jamaica, equally distributed? Is it? Are we having problems in terms of the economic elites and the political elites joining up with criminal elements? Because that happens in Jamaica. Is that happening in Trinidad and Tobago? Now, if that is happening also in Trinidad and Tobago, how do you think you're going to get rid of the criminals, of the drug traffickers, of human trafficking? Okay? How are you going to get rid of that? Okay? If politicians and people, the billionaires, the millionaires, the economic elites are involved in those sort of evil industries and activities. Okay? So you are looking at the few people that have been said to have been guilty, and some of them are perhaps guilty. Nicolas Maduro might be guilty of some of the charges that the United States has leveled against him. But my understanding of Western democracy is that we should go or put them on a trial. And then if the evidence indicates that they are guilty, then let the chip fall where it may. Okay? But you can't just say that people are guilty and because the US president suggests that they're guilty or any other person says that they're guilty, it means that therefore that they're guilty. Because even our politicians, when they're accused, they want to go before a tribunal. The other day when Trump was actually accused of being a convict, right? And suggested that he was behind what happened on January 6th. He went to a tribunal, right? Didn't he? Absolutely. What if they had arrested the president and sent him to court? Do you think that that would have been a good optics? No. Because they understand that the United States is operating in a country of checks and balances, and that if a man is accused, he is innocent until proven guilty. That is habeas corpus. Okay? That is what it is. You cannot just say somebody is a boat, you see a boat and you blow them up because you say that they were trafficking drugs. And even if they were trafficking drugs, you need to arrest them. The only way, and perhaps we could understand if they were killed, if they were attacking the US military and they had to defend themselves. But they were not, they were of no threat, I should say, to the US military. So we have to really get our facts together. And we need not side with any country or with any prime minister or president. We must side with the rule of law. People are telling me that I am socialist. No, I am far from being a socialist. In fact, I don't believe in socialism. I don't believe in any of the things that they do. I think capitalism might be the better of the two if it is handled well, if it is handled based on the rule of law. Okay, I believe that. But what I'm saying on my videos, or what I have been saying on my videos, my main thesis, my main point, my focal point is that everything has to be put under the lens of the law. what does the law say? And they need to go before a tribunal where they can defend their cause. And if they're guilty, then, as I'm suggesting, the law should run its course. So if Maduro is guilty, if Kamala is guilty, whomever is guilty, the law should run its course. That is the point I'm trying to make. Is that very difficult to understand, to grasp, to comprehend? I am not sure. I am not sure. But what I'm suggesting to you, on the other hand, is that the United States is a country that is seeking global hegemony. It is not here to protect you. It is not here to feed you. It is not here to provide any philanthropic help to you. It is here there to control. And whether it's in Afghanistan, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Jamaica, it is there to control. And as I talk about Jamaica, in 2010, for those of you who do not know, the United States wanted extradited a Jamaican drug kingpin that they described as one of the most dangerous drug kingpins at the time in the region. And that if he had been extradited and if his network had been broken up, Jamaica would have become safer. All right. And that is that the citizens believe that. Well, it's not all of them, but some of the citizens in Jamaica believed that if Christopher Dudus Coke had just gone to the United States, that Jamaica would have been left safe and everything because that network, because he was the drug kingpin. But that's not how it works. You take out one of them and then another replaces them. And Jamaica did not become safer after Dudus had been extradited. Didn't. Okay? And that is what you have to understand. So we cannot just see something and look at the problem in a simplistic manner in the way we do. I think we're watching too many YouTube videos and people talking nonsense. And too many of you are watching movies and thinking it's an action soap opera movie. This is real life, and real consequences will follow. And some heart-rending consequences will follow. But the region is accustomed to peace, and we're not aware of wars. We're not accustomed, we're not used to wars. So we don't have any idea of what the consequences of a war will bring and the devastation that it will wreak. We haven't got a clue. I remember growing up, and there was a hurricane in Jamaica called Hurricane Gilbert. And I was caught in it. I was caught up in that hurricane. And I was excited because I never knew and had never experienced a hurricane before. Heard people talking about hurricanes, read about hurricanes, but never experienced it. Okay? And I could understand when that thing came. Wow, I would never like to experience another one. Okay? And that is what we are thinking, that the US is just going to go into Venezuela, take out President Maduro, and leave the Caribbean in peace. That is not what is going to happen. The US is there to also arrest the resources of Trinidad and Guyana. So if you think that this is going to be something that is going to be simplistic and it's going to be at the spur of the moment, Maduro will be out, and that will solve your problem, you are in for a great surprise. Okay? Because things and events might be even far worse than you are expecting. Very important that you understand that. Now, there's a book called Full Spectrum Dominance that was written by Engel. I can't remember his name now. So Full Spectrum Dominance, let me go to the site here and see if I can put it up, by Engdahl. Yes, Full Spectrum Dominance. Now, as the sole hegemonic power remaining after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States was faced with two possible ways of dealing with a new Russian geopolitical reality. It could have cautiously but clearly signaled the opening of a new era of political and economic cooperation with its shattered and economically devastated former Cold War foe. The West, led by the United States, might have encouraged mutual de-escalation of the Cold War nuclear balance of terror and the conversion of industry, West as well as East, into civilian enterprises to rebuild civilian infrastructure and repair impoverished cities. The United States had the option of gradually dismantling NATO just as Russia had dissolved the Warsaw Pact and furthering a climate of mutual economic cooperation that could turn Eurasia into one of the world's most prosperous and thriving economic zones. Yet, listen to this, yet Washington chose another path to deal with the end of the Cold War. The path could be understood only from the inner logic of its global agenda, a geopolitical agenda. The sole remaining superpower chose stealth, deception, lies, and wars to attempt to control the Eurasian heartland, its only potential rival as an economic region by military force. Okay? And that's what it wanted to do. Kept secret from most Americans by George H.W. Bush and by his friend and de facto protege, Democratic President Bill Clinton, was the reality that for the faction that controlled the Pentagon, the military defense the industry, its many subcontractors, and the giant oil and oil services companies such as Halliburton, the Cold War never ended. All right? The Cold War never ended, and we are seeing now the Cold War coming again to the Caribbean. It was here before, right? Under the Manley government, under Chile. In Chile, it was there in Chile under Salvador Allende, in Grenada under Maurice Bishop. So we've seen this playbook before. This is nothing new, but it's coming into a different appearance, and we have to understand the transformation of the United States as the sole superpower of the world. Okay? The new Cold War assumed various disguises and deceptive tactics until September 11, 2001. Those events empowered an American president to declare permanent war, and I say permanent war. And notice I'm saying permanent, not a temporary, a permanent war against an enemy who was everywhere and nowhere. And if there is no enemy, an enemy will have to be created for this war, for this permanent war to survive. Very important that we understand that. Who allegedly threatened the American way of life, justifying laws that destroyed the way or that way of life in the name of the new worldwide war on terror. Right? And this is what is going to be in Venezuela, the war on terror. To put it crassly, Osama bin Laden was the answer to a Pentagon prayer in September 2001. Now that the United States desires to control the Caribbean region and to control the resources, we hear that there is oil, lots of oil, even it's a softer oil in Venezuela, if you will, right? In Venezuela, you have softer and a better quality oil, I understand, than what you have in Venezuela. So the United States wants to have all of the region's resources, or want to control the region's resources. And for that reason, it's not particularly interested in having the region come together, unite around their resources, and build the region in the interest of their people. The United States doesn't want that to happen. So what it does, it creates wars, or the pretexts for wars. And if you've read the playbook many times, as I have read, and if you're living and you're watching the news, as I do, then you understand that this is nothing new under the heavens. Very important that you understand. Okay? Now, what a few were aware of, largely because their responsible national media refused to tell them, was that since the fall of the Berlin Wall in November 1989, the Pentagon, which is now, by the way, we're hearing that the Defense Department is now going to be called the Department of War. So the US is not even hiding its agenda anymore. It's not the Department of Defense, because as Marco Rubio is suggesting, we're not just going to go out on wars of defense, but wars of offense. Okay, so the United States is now saying that we are a war country. That is what under Trump it has now, well, it has always been, but under Trump it has been fully declared. It has unmasked itself as a war empire, an empire that loves to launch and be engaged in wars, because wars is profitable, are profitable, I should say. Wars are profitable, not is profitable. Wars are profitable, are lucrative. Very important that we understand these very important facts. The Pentagon had been pursuing, step by careful step, a military strategy for domination of the entire, and I want to repeat that, the Pentagon had been pursuing, step by careful step, a military strategy for domination. What's the word? Domination. Do you know what that word means? That you control the entire world by force. For domination of the entire planet, a goal no earlier great power had ever achieved, though many had tried. Okay, so it's not because they didn't try. And if you read the Bible, you understand that that's what Babylon wanted to do, right? Remember that Babylon, actually challenged the power of God and told God, Nebuchadnezzar told God that this is my Babylon, and I am going to achieve full spectrum dominance, the dominance of the world. When Nebuchadnezzar looked at the glory of his kingdom of Babylon. But remember now that before he even uttered those words, Daniel had said to him in, I think it was Daniel 2, verse 44. It could be before, maybe it's not the correct verse. But Daniel said in chapter 2 of Daniel that all of these kingdoms shall not cleave one to another, which meant that there's not going to be any major power that will control the entire world. They will attempt, but God is going to stop them. And always, when they're just about on the verge, on the line of doing so, achieving their full spectrum dominance, boom, God steps in and shows them who is King of Kings and Lords of Lords. So all of they can talk all they want to do, and yes, you're going to have lots of collateral damage and lots of loss of lives. We're going to have them. And the purpose why I'm here is to let you know that a lot of what you're hearing on the media, what you're seeing on the media, are not true. And you've got to read. You've got to read your Bible. You've got to read your prophecies. You've got to read your histories. You've got to read, politics, geography. You've got to be engaged intellectually and stop thinking in the simplistic manner that you have United States, which is a democracy, who is going to come and take, what's his name, Nicolas Maduro out of power. And you are going to afterwards live safely in the region. It is not going to happen. In fact, I can guarantee you that it's going to get worse if that happens. Your life is going to be a living hell if that happens. We pray it doesn't happen. We pray for peace. Right? Because we think, even though we think our lives are miserable right now, we have to be careful for what might lie ahead. Very important that we understand this situation, this reality. Okay? So the United States, as we say, the strategy for domination of the entire planet, a goal no earlier great power had ever achieved, though many had tried. It was called by the Pentagon full spectrum dominance. And as its name implied, its agenda was to control everything, everywhere, including the high seas, land, air, space, and even outer space and cyberspace. And I leave you here. It says, where it's going to control? The high seas, land, air, space, and even outer space and cyberspace. This is what is called full spectrum dominance, the mantra, the motto of the US empire. Okay? So we can't have this understanding, ladies and gentlemen, that the US is there to help. It's not there to help. It's there to control. It's there to dominate. It's there to show you who is in charge and who controls all the resources, or should control all the resources of the world. Whether it's in Jamaica, it's in Trinidad, it's in Guyana, it's in Grenada, it's in Afghanistan, it's in Europe. The US wants full control. The US wants and desires full spectrum dominance. Okay? And you've got to read these things. You've got to really educate your minds about what is happening, about empire, and the quest for control of the entire globe. Okay? And the only way in which the United States can achieve its full spectrum dominance is through violence and through force. Because people are not going to give up their oil wells just like that. They don't want to give up their homes and their lands just like that, as Saddam Hussein, vouched for not doing, but eventually died and was sacked from power. So eventually, I think Nicolas Maduro or whoever succeeds him will lose to the US in terms of sacking them. But it's not going to make the problem, it's not going to solve the problems in the Caribbean and Latin America. It's going to worsen the problems, because that's a very dangerous precedent that the United States is setting. Okay? It has to work collaboratively with the leaders of the Caribbean to see what the allegations against Nicolas Maduro are true. Have to work with the region, and the United States is not working with the region. What she's doing, she's saying, this is what I want, and the leaders of our region are lining up behind her and saying, yes, do it, do it. Okay? And then they dish out to us propaganda that many of our citizens believe. So this is what I am suggesting. The US is here for control. That is what it is here for. It's not here to laugh with you, right? The US is here for control. That is what this impending US war on Venezuela is about. And you've got to wake up. You've got to inform your neighbors that this is going to be a nightmare. If it ever happens, we pray that it doesn't happen. But if it does happen, it is going to be a nightmare for the Caribbean and Latin American region. It might be the complete transformation of this hemisphere. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe. Like the videos so the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. And those who would like to make their monetary contributions, I am going to leave my Cash App address in the description. You can make your payments out to that. I forgot the address right now, so I'll write it in the description when I will have published the video. All right, so thank you so much and have yourselves a great weekend. Ciao.